And well, as for this room, we're going to finish with Gender Plus, which is going to be presented by Michael. And as we were introducing earlier this morning during the award ceremony, this project has developed a great set of tools that I think it's mostly focused on vocational education and training centers, but they can be replicated and used by any other institution, because the main goal of it is making these institutions or organizations more aware about how they can provide their services free of prejudices based on gender identity. More or less. I think that it's better that I let Michael explain it to you, because I haven't had the chance to really get to meet the project. Looking forward to do so in the future study visits. So thank you, Michael, for explaining Gender Plus one more time. And please keep in mind that they are going to be available in the stands later. So any question, I think they will be very happy to answer them to you afterwards.
Thanks, Sylvia. I'll just share my screen now with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you can all see the screen.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'll just start by giving a bit of background to who aspire-igen is. So we are a not-for-profit social enterprise based in the north of England in a city called Bradford. We're involved in a variety of different projects, Erasmus funding, Horizon 2020 and others. Our projects are mainly focused on the vocational sector, as Sylvia introduced us, also about careers guidance and employability skills, addressing inclusion and things like that, equality and diversity. Gender Plus is a 2-year Key Action 2 Erasmus Plus project, which actually finished last month. So it's just finished. So it's especially flattering to receive an award from Sylvia's organisation to sort of show the work we've been doing on this project. The project takes a pluralistic approach to gender. And what I mean by that is that we don't just focus on one element of the gender issues that were introduced earlier this morning. So we're talking about gender in all forms. So that could be things like addressing the gender pay gap for women, addressing the glass ceiling that women often encounter when they try to go the career ladder and gain promotions. We're focusing on issues facing men. A lot of the times we forget that there are gender issues for men as well. So addressing things like peer pressure and toxic masculinity and what we call lad culture in the UK. So the kind of barriers that men face in pursuing education and careers, and also addressing trans issues as well. So I mentioned during the award ceremony that trans and non-binary young people are more likely to be out of work or out of education because of discrimination and things like that. So we're focusing on all gender-related issues. And over the past 24 months or 2 years, we developed a series of governance and benchmarking tools to be used by the VET sector. But as Sylvia just mentioned, even though VET is the focus of the project, you'll see when you access our platform online that it can be applied to different areas of education, as well as the workforce, the workplace, within all European countries. It's to tackle the underrepresentation of minority gender groups in VET. So what we mean by that is that often we see that female students follow certain career paths, whether it's childcare or health and social care, while male students follow things like construction, plumbing, working in a manual position. And we're not saying there's anything wrong with that. That's just how people are socialised. But we are trying to sort of target those people who want to follow what we call gender atypical career choices. So, for example, if a young male student or young person wants to work in childcare or health and social care, that he feels supported in doing so. So in terms of how he's treated by his tutor, how he's treated by his colleagues and other people on the training programme, so that male, female or trans students feel supported in pursuing the career that they want to do. So they follow a career that's their passion or their interest, rather than they feel forced to do it because that's what men do, that's what women do, that's what trans people should do. Gender Plus follows a top-down approach. So when people access our different resources, they are representing their organisation as a whole. In our initial research, we found there were lots of different studies that were kind of focused on one particular gender issue, so something to do with trans rights or something to do with women, but we're sort of talking about gender as a whole and the VT sector as a whole. So both the classroom training that young people get, but also when they go out into the workplace, they are supported in whatever they want to do. So an anecdote I gave last month was one young female student wanted to follow a construction course, and she had the qualifications. She joined the class. The classroom training was fine. She felt supported by her tutor. However, when she went to the construction site or the building site, there were no hard hats that fit her head, or overalls which covered a smaller body, or steel-toe cap boots for safety purposes. There was nothing in a female shoe size or boot size. So there's these very small, minor things that vocational education and training can put into place to make all young people feel represented and valued on their team. The Gender Plus project has partners from a variety of different European countries. So we have obviously the British coordinator, aspire-igen. We have partners in Finland, Slovenia, Bulgaria, Cyprus, and Italy. And that's obviously to address the uneven picture of gender that was represented in this morning's presentations by the experts about how there's differences in terms of things like trans rights differ across Europe, issues to do with gender, the gender pay gap. There's an uneven picture across Europe. In terms of the outputs or the useful resource that we have created on this project, the first output is a Gender Plus Charter. And as it says in my presentation here, this sets out the minimum requirements an organisation should adhere to or conform to in order to be a gender positive organisation or offer a gender positive environment. So this involved lots of different research, both desk and field research, into current best practices and trends across Europe. So this involved partner countries and also beyond partner countries. So aspire-igen is the UK Euro Guidance Centre. So that allowed us to have interviews or conduct interviews with people outside the partnership to get an even more extensive perspective on what kind of issues there are in terms of gender inclusion within the VET sector across Europe. So we created an ebook which talks about the best practices and introduces them, and then boils down all that data, all that information into a charter, which is these minimum requirements. And this focuses on things like to do with staff training, or the kind of resources that young people are offered in an organisation, how educators counteract bullying, how they refer to students, so if they honour things like people's preferred pronouns, so he, she, or they. The minimum requirements that were developed as part of the charter then fed into what we call the benchmarking tool. So using the requirements that were put out in the charter, a vocational practitioner, educator, can go onto this free benchmarking tool, which is in all partner languages. They enter their information and they answer a series of questions. And these questions are based on the minimum requirements that have been set out in the charter. As they run through this benchmarking tool, once they've answered all the questions, they're given a score. This is what we call a gender footprint. And a gender footprint basically translates as the extent to which an educator or an organisation actually follows these guidelines. Over time, we encourage people to go back to the benchmarking tool, reviewing the best practices that we've found, and trying to make those small adjustments to their service that they provide, both whether it's the education in a classroom or on, in a children's nursery or on a construction site. Small adjustments that can be made to make their provision more gender inclusive. When their gender footprint has been reduced, so when they are as gender inclusive as possible, they can then download a Gender Plus kite mark and a Gender Plus certificate, which basically says or states that they are an aspiring gender champion. So that aside from all the other kind of provision they offer, they also have a particular interest in gender inclusion. So as I mentioned before, making courses accessible to both men and women, depending on how they identify, but also for trans students as well. Each of these outputs are interconnected. So we've gone from the charter to the benchmarking tool. Once an organisation has reduced their gender footprint successfully, they are then able to access what we call the gender champion skills profile. So this was a skills profile listing the core, important and optional skills that this person should be. So the gender champion is, in effect, a member of staff who can either be nominated from the existing staff body or recruited externally to be the go-to person for gender-related issues. Obviously, within education, whether it's primary, secondary, early years, vocational, adult education, higher education, university, there should be all members of staff should be kind of interested in gender inclusion and equality and diversity. However, we are aware that most educators, if not all educators, are overworked and they don't really have the time to dedicate specific focus on gender. So a gender champion would be the person who would be almost like the gatekeeper or the person to signpost their staff and colleagues to services. So whether it's to do with things like their knowledge of legislation, or they have contacts within advocacy groups or LGBTQ organisations. So within the skills profile and resources, we have access to the Gender Champion skills profile, which again, it's been translated into Italian, Greek, Bulgarian, Slovenian, and Finnish, as well as the English base model. So, you do have access to that if you'd like to look at it. That's all accessible on our project website. As well as the skills profile, we also have a YouTube channel where we acts as like a repository of different video content which pertains to gender inclusion within each partner country. So we've got translated content there, and it focuses on all different issues. So whether it's toxic masculinity or peer pressure faced by male students, trans rights, and then also gender inclusion from a women's perspective. So addressing the gender pay gap and the equality index and glass ceilings. We also have in development, we have a list of additional resources that people can access. And again, this is all free online for people to access. The next slide here just shows a screenshot from the benchmarking tool. So if you were to go onto our website and follow the directions to the benchmarking tool, once you register on the page, we'll have access to this dashboard. So you can see on the dashboard here, you have access to the Gender Plus Kite Mark and certificate that I mentioned. You can also download the Gender Plus Charter, which is the minimum requirements. You can discover more best practices in gender inclusion, as well as assessing your gender inclusivity. And as I said before, we do encourage people, this isn't just a one-time thing. We ask them to go back into it over time and try to reduce their gender footprint and become more and more gender inclusive. Also, on a European perspective, you can see there on the left panel, View Insights tab. The View Insights tab takes you to a page which shows how your organisation compares with other organisations. So, for example, Sylvia could go in there and see how her organisation compares to other Spanish organisations, as well as other European organisations as a whole. So you can see where you need to improve. So in terms of the Gender Champions, the gender benchmarking tool, we have different categories. So we have things like policies, we have the communication skills that you need to develop, staff training, and also teaching practices. So it kind of covers the whole element of education within a vocational setting. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, you can see here our different partner organisations. So we have aspire-igen, who I work for as project officer. We have Learn Mira, who are based in Helsinki. We have LUNG or LUNG, who are based in Nova Gorica in Slovenia. We have the Business Foundation for Education, who are based in Sofia in Bulgaria, BFE. We have the Centre for Social Innovation, CSI, in Nicosia in Cyprus. And finally, CIAPE, who are based in Italy, in Rome. So once you have access to this presentation, you'll be able to click on all these hyperlinks and find out more about the organisations involved. And as we've said, after this presentation, you'll have a chance to speak to both myself on behalf of aspire-igen and my colleague from Chiappe, who is an Italian speaker as well as a French speaker. So if you'd rather discuss Gender Plus in French or Italian, you can also speak to them as well. As you can see here, you have access to the Gender Plus website, which has our different resources, benchmarking tool access, as well as our Facebook page. And finally, there's my email address if you have any questions. And if you are interested in working with aspire-igen or any of the partner organisations, feel free to look at the calls we're interested in and the kind of partners we work with and the kind of topics that we cover, and would be definitely happy, despite Brexit, to get involved in any future projects. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. Thank you to the three of you. And well, as they were saying, I think it's really, really interesting to take the opportunity to meet them now and later. They are going to be available at the exhibitors area from now until 2, and then they will be back from 3 to 4:30. So if you go there, what you can do is either send them a message of interest, which is good, but you actually have the chance to schedule an appointment with them. There will be like 15 minutes one-to-one calls. And then I think it's a great chance to just see what's the common ground between you, what can you take from their projects, how can you use the tools they've developed. And of course, as we know, there are many upcoming European calls, starting usually in January, February. We have the ANEF, we have the Erasmus Plus, of course, and it's always a good opportunity to meet other organizations that can be partners of us. And despite all these calls for funding, there are other opportunities of just learning from each other and collaborating. So take that opportunity, go to the stands, and ask to meet them later. I think it will be a very good idea. Thank you all for staying with us. We know it's been quite a long morning, but we hope it has also been inspiring, motivating, and fruitful. So, well, we're happy to discuss any comments that you have on our email, the one that we've used to send you all the reminders. And, well, it hasn't finished yet. As I said, we will be in the exhibitors area from now on. Thank you all.